Welcome back, David. This week's topic, let's dig into spring. Spring is coming. Let's embrace the spring. Let's see what's where, how. And this topic kind of came up following up our conversations that we are doing a blood test for everyone now, starting the spring to see what's going to happen for them in summer. Some things we see that are just reflection of them living through the winter. So, do you want to open up about what actually do you see in a blood test now? What's the most common one? And maybe is it spring related or is it related to something else? But is it outside environment related or inside environment related and so on and so forth? And then I'll want you to maybe tap into something that I just did, which was 5-day seminar as well, maybe if we'll have some time. But how do we harness, and is there a benefit of environmental changes now? So days are getting longer. What's happening to our body? What was happening through the winter that we can actually see in a blood test as well? And how do we guide ourselves through the change of the seasons to get the most benefit in improvement in our physical and cognitive health?
Yes. So let's start with the blood stuff first. So the thing that you're going to see with anybody that lives in the northern hemisphere, that's been, obviously living through the last 2 months of diminishing days, dark days, the number one thing you're going to see is a slight level of insulin resistance. That's going to be reflected in one or two markers or all three, right?
So
So
which
the
would
main
they
ones
be?
that you're,
Which would they be?
yeah, that would be glucose, A1C, and fasted insulin. It's very important to understand you need all three to properly assess this. If you're only looking at one, no good. If you're only looking at two, it can be dicey. You're making an assumption, right? So this is what I see, even with people that are healthy and technically don't have any insulin problems. You will see a mild elevation in fasted insulin values. The reason for that is because you're indoors more. What does that mean? You are under artificial lights more. We are a creature that responds to light just like every other creature on this planet. Um, and one of the main effects from artificial light, specifically LED lighting, and when I say artificial lighting, that also includes spectrums of light you can't see, like Wi-Fi and stuff like that. When you're indoors more, you are by default getting more of those, and those inadvertently raise insulin values. So you'll see a fasted insulin value. If your fasted insulin value is normally like a 3 or a 4, which is ideal, you'll start to see it look like a 5 or a 6 or a 7, which means it's taking a little bit more insulin to control your blood glucose. So the most common variation that I see with fit people and people that are healthy, even in the winter, is you'll see, hey, glucose is still normal, still fine. A1C maybe has gone up like a tenth of a point, which is not a big deal, and then the insulin has gone up 2 or 3 points, right? That shows you the shift of, hey, you're indoors more, you're pushing a little bit more insulin to be able to control the glucose. Now, if the person is out of shape or somebody who just doesn't have a lot of muscle mass, then you'll start to see, hey, A1C has gone up 3 or 4 points, 3 or 4 tenths of a point, and is close to the pre-diabetic range, on the doctor scale. It'll be like a 5.5 or a 5.6, right on the edge. And then you'll see their insulin value be like a 8 or a 9. So it's gone up even further, more than 2 or 3 points. It's gone like doubled, right? If it was a 4, it's now an 8 or a 10. And the reason for that is they are requiring even more pressure than a fit person to control that glucose value, right? That is if those people naturally spend time outside during the summer months, right? If your whole lifestyle is the same year round, it actually just gets worse and worse, irrelevant of the season, because you're actually not interacting with the season. Now, what does that have to do with spring coming? The days are getting longer. Your body needs to understand that. And in order to understand that, you have to interact with the outside world. Does that mean you physically have to go outside? No, but you do have to remove glass between you and the outside world so that your eyes and brain can start to interpret, hey, there's actually sunlight for longer periods of time than we're used to. And that will naturally start to lower blood glucose, which lowers the amount of insulin that's needed. And so you start to undo the insulin resistance that's going on. That's the main thing you're going to see at this time of the year, irrelevant of who you are. Even I am not immune to it. I can see that in my blood work. It takes a little bit more insulin to control the same blood glucose. Not enough that makes me alarmed, but I do spend more time than the average person outside, even in the winter.
I just
So
saw my HbA1c by 1/10 of a point increase, but bear in mind I'm always on 1,000 grams of carbs every single day. I think that's great.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like you have to put it into perspective, right? The things that I'm saying are broad strokes. The individual will actually, that's why we harp on you
And
can't just get a blood test and think that you're going to to interpret it correctly. The
I
doctor's not
think
even
it's
going to really
important
interpret it
to kind
correctly.
of highlight as well what we always talk about, like when you're doing your blood test and get a consultation from doctor, because for whatever reason, mine send me a feedback. I always ask, just don't give me a feedback, because your feedback is irrelevant. You just Google it. Understanding the environment where that blood test was taken and how that affected you. Like my doctor would just send me like, hey, you need to take this medicine. I'm like, do I really need metformin? I can just go for a walk. Like I know I've just not been as active as I am usually because it's raining every goddamn day. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
understanding
yeah.
the
And
difference
so
between blood test being out of the range because of the environment can help you massively alleviate the stress that might be coming with it. Because somebody will just tell, hey, there is something wrong with you. No, there's not. Your body is just extremely good at adapting to seasons.
yes, but very, very much so. That's well said, right? Having said exactly what I said, what you're going to see in the wintertime, that is a wintertime adaptation. Why is that? Because insulin, people don't know this, insulin acts differently depending on the temperature. In other words, when you're getting less sunlight, the body is anticipating colder temperatures. That's why insulin comes up. It has almost nothing to do with the food you're eating. It has to do with the adaptation of less sun is coming in, less energy is coming into the system. Insulin comes up a little bit. Yes, that controls your glucose. It's still doing that. But insulin at a higher level protects you against the cold environment. We know this from amphibians. Frogs, for example, use high insulin to hibernate in the winter, to go into stasis. It keeps their tissues from freezing and damaging. It acts as an antifreeze. Just so people understand, mammals come from amphibians. This is a leftover evolutionary adaptation. Okay. So it is supposed to happen, but if you don't interact with high sunlight environments, which is why we're making this video, it continues to happen for years and years and years, which then leads to prediabetes and diabetes, type 2 diabetes, etc. Right? You can undo insulin resistance in a matter of a month or two, right? That's what this video is going to focus on. What do we do as spring starts to happen? Just so that people are aware, UV light, if you're at 40 degrees latitude or high, all the way up to 50 degrees latitude, which is most of our listeners, that's going to be basically everybody in North America and everybody in Europe. UVB light starts to come back at the end of this month. So at the end of January, you will now get UV light for about 3 hours in the middle of the day, from about 11:30 a.m. until about 2:30 p.m. That's the time to be outside to start sulfating your cholesterol. That's another thing that will happen in blood work. Your cholesterol value, your LDL specifically, will go up in the winter. That's on purpose. Why? Because you are depleting sex hormones during the winter because you're not able to create them because you don't have any UV light. You're taking any of the hormones you made in the summertime and unbinding them from sex binding globulin and using them actively. Eventually, you can run that gas tank short, right? So what does the body do? It adapts to be able to create a surplus of them the moment the UV light comes in. So LDL cholesterol will come up during the winter months. That's another adaptation. That's a mammal adaptation. And so getting out into UV light early in the season gives you the best outcome because of two things. Uh, in the episodes that we've done talking specifically about grounding and specifically about electron flow, most people will understand that you are an electrical being. You are electricity, right? And you can collect electricity from food. All your food turns into electrons. And you can collect electricity from the environment. Cold combined with UV light is an amplifier of electrical current. So it gives you more energy for neurotransmitter production and things of that nature. So really talking specifically, springtime is the most important time for mammals like us that do not hibernate to ensure that we expose our surfaces to both cold and sunlight. The best time to do that is between 11:30 and 2:30 p.m. It's the only time to do that because it's the only time that will be UV light available. I get it if you can't do it every day, right? People have to go to work, but that ideally you don't work 7 days a week, right? If you're not taking at least 1 or 2 days off, I feel sorry for you. That's a problem, right? That's a problem that needs corrected. That's a lifestyle issue that will lead to an early grave if you're not taking at least a few days off during the week.
And I
And
think
on
what
those
you
days
just
off,
said, you kind of had a hidden message there. What I kind of want to pull out and see if that's correct, what I'm hearing. What you just described is like if you are doing your cholesterol check and doctor gives you a medicine immediately, have you done your cholesterol check through the year to see how environment affects it differently, how nutritional strategy affects it differently, and maybe as most of people out there are now, maybe your hormone replacement therapy, that's going to affect your cholesterol as well. So if you don't take those three in account and just look on your blood test in January, oh God, my cholesterol is really bad. Doctor, help me out. He will help you out by giving you medicine, which might not be actually the case that you actually need anything like that. Am I hearing that correctly?
that is 100% correct, right? That is 100% correct because if you take that to the final point, the medicine they're going to give you is a statin. That statin is going to lower LDL. It's going to lower the adaptation of the mammal sex hormone creation cascade. What does that mean? That means if you take a statin to lower your LDL, later in the spring, later spring and early summer, when you naturally get more sunlight, or hopefully you do, you won't even have the substrate to create enough sex hormones for yourself. You see what I'm saying? Because cholesterol turns into vitamin D, so you won't have enough to make vitamin D. It turns into DHEA and pregnenolone, which are precursors to your sex hormones. And even more important than that, they are precursors to cortisol. Cortisol is what drives activity every day. It's what drives focus and narrowness of ability to be awake and mindful in especially in the early days of or early hours of the day. So if you lower LDL, you make somebody lethargic, you make somebody not sexually active, and you lower their immune system, right? That's the
I do see it a
implications
lot.
of what
I always go to people when they go like, I'm on statins. I'm like, are you on Viagra as well? Because that's the next step usually. And then metformin. And then I'm like, you started with lowering your cholesterol and now you're on 15 different medicines. Had you not done that route, you might have saved yourself from doing this. And it's
yeah.
easier said than done because you still don't hear too many people talking about this. It kind of starts to come up to light now, a little bit more, since we started talking about this and since you brought up to speed everyone like, hey, this is what you need to do. This is why you need to be outside. This is why sun is so essential for all of us. But going from that, where does nutrition come in play? Does it need to change as the spring comes on? Can we
So
somehow
so
enhance
yeah.
benefits of the ongoing sun, well, prolonged sun exposure in a spring with some nutritional strategies to further fuel us for better circadian rhythm, better hormone production, and so on and so forth?
Yes, yes. So ideally, right? Ideally, during before springtime, it's been winter time. So ideally, you've gone through the seasonal change that we talked about early in the fall, right? Hey, you need to start lowering carbohydrate intake. You need to start eating a little bit more fats and more protein. You need to start bringing in more seafood, more electron heavy foods, right? If you've done that, then you don't really need to change anything at this point in time. If you haven't, right, and you're just learning about this information now, then you can speed this up by going very, very heavy into a seafood diet. And that seafood diet doesn't necessarily mean to be cooked fish, right? It can be, right? That's probably going to be the easiest, but it can also be broths, seafood broths, right? And bone broths and things of that nature. Why? Because they're electron heavy water, essentially, right? You're distilling all the nutrients into water and you're getting a lot of sodium into water. Why is that important? Because water is a red light chromophore. And what I'm just telling you is I want you to, you're only going to have about 2 hours of a window outside that's going to be beneficial. So you want to maximize that window as much as possible. And you need to do that. And you can do that through nutritional means by eating electron heavy foods that have high amounts of water, high amounts of sodium, so that you can collect more light per unit of time that you're outside. So if you're just learning about this, because if you didn't employ changing the food earlier in the fall, then you're basically a little bit behind the curve and you need to build up electron flow and electrons in the body faster than somebody else. So you need to basically be eating almost exclusively broths and seafood broths and bone broths and tissue broths from other animals to accelerate your ability to collect sunlight when you are able to get out, even if it's for 2 days out of the week, right? So from a nutritional strategy, depending on exactly when you're learning this information, you need to really dive 100% into what I just said. Or if you've already done the nutritional change of a little bit lower carbs, a little bit more meat sources, then you don't really need to change anything quite yet. The real nutritional change happens in March, so, at the equinox, and that is when you start introducing uh, more carbohydrate foods, uh, like way more tubers. You could even, depending on exactly your latitude, you could introduce more rice, and those are going to be amplifying everything as far as energy output and more activity and making you feel more alive. Right? Again, I'm not a anti-carb person. Carbs are beneficial, especially when you start to pair them with the right environmental change.
Mm. And I think this is very kind of prominent when I was growing up. Hey, very up north and whatnot, and everyone eats a lot of soups through the winter. Bone broth is just you just drink it every day. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of people spend time outside. Uh, Tell me more about effects on stress. You were talking about cortisol and whatnot. So we need to have it high to have high energy in the morning and on those kind of things. How does it affect mood if somebody has high cortisol? Because mine in winter, I notice is much higher than in summer.
Yeah, yeah. And so the reason is because so that's a great thing. So another thing that you will notice in blood work is higher cortisol values because you're under more stress, more light stress. What does that mean? Stress is all encompassing, including when your body senses that it's not getting enough energy, enough electrons. Remember what I said about food? Food is electrons. Okay. So what does that do? It drives more food consumption because your body is starved of electrons if you're spending the winter inside, right? Even if you go outside, if you're fully clothed and you just go right into your car and then go into the office building, you didn't actually spend any time outside, right? So you didn't collect any electrons from the outside environment. So your body starts to become more and more dependent on food electrons, which can drive weight gain, right? And that is a stress, right? Everybody kind of understands, hey, when I get stressed, I might eat more food. Everybody kind of has experienced that a little bit. And that is what's going to drive cortisol up because cortisol combats stress. Now, if you are somebody who's never actually embraced the environment, you may actually start to see that in the winter you end up with low cortisol. These are people that have not ever really been in the, experienced environmental uh, uptick in their energy during even the summer months. They're people that spend all their time inside. Um, those people are actually going to be starved of cortisol production. And usually because their DHEA, going back to the LDL cholesterol turning into DHEA, the DHEA is subpar, it's low. And so the body wants to conserve that. It doesn't want to use it up because it's a valuable thing that turns into cortisol. So it starts lowering cortisol production. It may make you more brain foggy. It may make you feel a little bit more depressed because and not even depressed like from a mental state, just depressed in the term of I don't really want to move around, right? I don't really want to move around very much. And that's because cortisol starts to become suppressed. My marker or my cutoff for a suppressed cortisol in the winter is somewhere around 10. These are US units. So if your cortisol comes back like a 9 or an 8, even though it was in the morning when you got your blood test done, then it tells me that, hey, if we don't have DHEA, we need to look at your DHEA value because it's more than likely pretty low. And depending, right, depending on how low it is and depending on exactly, the time of the, like, for example, right now in January, you're not going to have any UV light to create any DHEA anyway. In December, you definitely wouldn't have. So that is a context for maybe you need a little bit of DHEA and maybe a little bit of licorice root to fill up your DHEA tank and convert it into cortisol, right? Because licorice root is a signaler for converting. It does a lot of things, but it is one of the things it does is it takes DHEA and signals to turn into cortisol. So those are going to affect you in that way in the wintertime if you haven't exposed yourself to UV light frequently and made plenty of DHEA yourself during the times of the year where it's available. Those are the symptoms that you will experience in the winter related to cortisol, which in the end ties back to LDL and exposing yourself to UVA and UVB light.
This brings me, I have two questions now. So this brings me to next, probably the ones that makes more sense is, how do you get rid of the habits that these changes on our physiology because of winter are getting formed? Meaning you want to spend more time inside, you are not so active and so on and so forth. So when your body adapts to it, all your hormones are making you to feel more comfortable to be at that stage. What can you do to snap out of it? Apart from that, just sheer will, is there anything else that?
So again, it's kind of a chicken and the egg type of scenario in that context, right? If you're somebody who has just learned about this type of information, I will tell you that in the wintertime is by far the hardest to try to make these changes, right? Because you have to build the willpower. And we do have an episode on this where we specifically talk about a part of the brain that builds willpower just by doing little acts of going outside, and basically anything that you don't want to do. So things that I would say in the wintertime can be beneficial for somebody like this is take a cold shower, right? At least you're not suffering the effect of going outside, but taking a cold shower is a thing that you don't want to do, but it's easy to do, right? It doesn't cost you anything.
And
It's
again, it's not
really just
full-blown shower. It can be just 10, 20 seconds at the end of the shower
correct.
to begin with.
Yep. Experience cold. Experience being uncomfortable. It doesn't matter, right, what it is. Now, cold gives you other benefits. That's why I say do a cold shower. But it could be a workout. But the problem is the workout isn't going to tune down the sensitivity to light, and you're suffering a light stress in the wintertime. That's why I opt for a cold shower. But technically, to build willpower, it can be anything you don't want to do, right? But a cold shower offers other biological benefits. When you get in the habit of doing that, then you upgrade to now the habit can be, hey, if I commute, I'm going to roll down my windows and I'm going to take my coat off so that I can get a little bit more cold and daylight now absent of a glass window, right? And so rolling down the window of a car when you're in your morning commute is another great way to start building resiliency and willpower. And it starts to kick off these cascades of adapting to going and experiencing the environment. So those are like the low hanging stuff, right? For people that are just getting started and you're starting in the winter, unfortunately. Now, if you're starting in the spring and the summer, it's a lot more pleasant, right? The sun is out. When it's sunny and there isn't any wind, it's actually kind of nice because you're not sweating and hot and you're getting a lot of sun. So at this current moment, I would say it's more difficult, which is why New Year's resolutions fail in January. The reason why is because it is the worst time of the year to build willpower, because the thing that you have to do to build willpower is probably one of the most uncomfortable experiences that you'll experience. Getting cold is something that you retort from. It's something you don't want to do, right? And it's unnatural to willingly want to. Now, once you've built resiliency, once you've built the willpower, I crave the cold. I crave going outside because when I don't, right, you've experienced this when I spend a week or two, right? Recently, I've been building my own house, and most of the work that needed to be done in these last 2 months has been inside the house. So, and I'm kind of a workaholic, and I, would have gone probably 8 weeks without spending time outside in the middle of the day. And I just finally, I had some hacks, special lighting, that side of stuff. So I didn't lack energy. I didn't lack physical energy, but I started to lack willpower right here. I started to lack fortitude in my mind. And the moment that hit me is the moment I took a break. I took a whole week off from building on the house, and all I did was go outside and sit in my lawn chair at 0 degrees Fahrenheit and 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like 0 degrees Celsius and negative 15 Celsius, and just sat outside for as long as I could stand. One day I made it 7 hours, 7 hours of just laying outside, freezing in the sun. Within 3 days, I could tell I had my willpower back. I could tell that I had my fortitude back in my mind, and then I resumed my work, right? It's that powerful once you understand this to lean into it, right? When you're first starting, you're not gonna like it. You're not gonna put those two together that easily.
You gave some good tips about. I want to go back to like opening the window of a car. If you're in the UK and it's raining really heavy, it doesn't mean you need to go all the way down. Even like little,
4 or 5 centimeters is enough.
yeah. What other lifestyle habits can be implemented to kind of enhance this? And before you go there, I want to go back to blood tests. Thyroid. Do you see any changes in thyroid values affected
Mhm.
by winter season?
Most of the time, if you have an intact thyroid, meaning your metabolism is good, your thyroid is good, what you will see is a downturn in T4. Now, T4 is not active. It gets made at night after melatonin release. Why would you see that one go down and not T3? Because you're under artificial lights longer periods of time. Your body starts to not understand when the nighttime starts. So production of T4 gets curtailed because melatonin gets curtailed because of all the artificial lights that you're under at night and basically all day. So your melatonin production gets lowered, and melatonin is the starting hormone for nighttime processes. And the level of melatonin that you have will correlate with how much T4 you should make. We have an episode that we've talked about that, how they're correlated, because melatonin is a antioxidant first. It's not a sleep hormone first. It's an antioxidant first. And so the level of UV or hormetic stress that you experience, because cold will make melatonin and sunlight will make melatonin during the day. So when you go to nighttime and you cut off blue light entering the eye, the melatonin that you made during the day through environmental stimulus rises and tells the brain, hey, this is how much environmental stimulus this creature had. Therefore, it correlates to how much T4 is going to be made because T4, thyroid, governs all metabolic processes, not just calories. It's not a calorie thing. It is metabolic processes. That's catabolic processes and anabolic processes. All the cell processes are governed through that. So you start to slow down the metabolism unintentionally because thyroid production, T4 specifically, starts to get curtailed. Most people won't experience a T3 drop. The reason they won't is because they're drinking plenty of coffee and they're drinking plenty of stimulants during the winter. The rise in stimulants goes up in the winter, and that rises cortisol, and that kind of dovetails with the conversion of T4 to T3. So you won't really see a drop in T3. You might even see a rise in T3 because the body is adapting to that stress response. But if your T4 is low enough, say, for example, you are somebody who spends all the time inside, your T4 was probably already subpar going into winter, and then it goes even lower during winter. Now your T3 starts to drop because T3 has to come from T4.
Yes, that's definitely something that's pretty standout things that I see as well. What about other habits? So you talked about connecting with nature. Okay, try to go outside a bit more. Try to spend outside time in the middle of the day, later in this month. Uh, Try to get cold now and then. Maybe if you can't get a shower, wash your face with cold water.
Yes.
I was fortunate enough to grow up without hot water. I had to wash in cold water all the time. So probably that's why I'm a bit more resilient than most people. And what other things would you implement in a sense of, is there maybe a type of workouts that you can do? Majority of people have heard about 75 hard, one workout in the morning, one workout inside, one workout outside. How can we use springtime paired with any kind of physical workout or maybe even physical job to enhance our ability to be healthier physically and cognitively as the year goes on?
Yeah. I would say I'm gonna make it in a, hey, you should be working out as number one, right? Number two, I agree with the 75 hard. A workout should be done at least outside once in a while, right? And right now is the time of year to kind of lean into that. Now, I will get a little bit more specific on what are you trying to accomplish with the workout? That's probably the more important thing. That's, the devil's in the details type of thing, right?
And before you go there, I just had a conversation an hour ago with somebody who described me his phenomenal workout, and I was just listening. You described me how to get tired, not how to get better. So
Right.
explain the
Yes.
difference, please.
Yeah. So number one, we want to optimize mitochondrial function, right? Because the mitochondria is what's going to create all of these processes in the body. Number one, right? The creation of vitamin D is going to depend on the mitochondria. The creation of your sex hormones depends on the mitochondria, et cetera. I can go on. The mitochondria govern all these processes that we've talked about, period. The mitochondria require great oxygen efficiency. We know this from studies. Fitness, I'm going to define fitness. The greater your fitness, the greater your longevity and the greater your outcomes in life. Fitness is defined by your VO2 max. Why? Because that's a direct measurement of how efficient your mitochondria are at using oxygen, period. Bar none. We've talked about this in our training video that we recently done a week or two back, where, hey, if you are not focusing on making your aerobic capacity match your physical body, you're missing out, right? And so what I say to people in the wintertime specifically is when you work out outside, don't try to, hamstring yourself with, oh, I don't have the right equipment to work out outside. I'm like, you don't need equipment. You have a jump rope or you have some shoes that you can run in. You need some aerobic activity outside. That is by far, if you're going to do an outside workout, it should be aerobic in nature because you're trying to amplify aerobic capacity. Cold helps you create a better stimulus. What does that mean? That means for every minute outside that you spend doing aerobic work in the cold, you get better reward out of it, right? So one of the easiest things to do, take a elliptical, take a treadmill, take any cardio piece of equipment if you have it, and put it outside, right? Put it in your garage. That's going to be cold. It's not heated or whatever, or on a back porch or somewhere outside that you can hop on and do 20 minutes of aerobic work outside. If you don't have a piece of cardio equipment, not a big deal. Go for a little jog. Go for a jump rope session. And anything that you can do outside that's aerobic in nature is going to give you this is a 1 + 1 = 3 effect when you do it outside in the cold. So that is very precise. That's very poignant at what you should do outside. You can do other things, right? I'm not saying don't do other things. The more, the better. But if you only have 10 minutes outside, 20 minutes outside that you're going to do that, do some aerobic work outside.
And I think this is where what I usually tell all people I work with, you have unfair advantage if you have kids. Get
Yeah,
your kids outside
absolutely.
and play some games. Make up
Yeah,
some.
yeah. Make a snowman, play in the snow, go, do winter activities, right? Winter activities all involve being outside, right? So just embrace that, right? Just embrace that. And if you do that, you're already doing yourself a bigger benefit than most.
I think this is a good start for somebody who's kind of coming in. Maybe they haven't listened over 100 videos we created so far, and kind of like, okay, this is a fresh start. Sounds like I need to do a blood test, which we all should do a couple times a year. At least once a year would be minimum for, like, I've just done mine, and everything came back with slight things off what you just discussed. I've also done 5 days of being in Tony Robbins seminar, and my body is wrecked. So we might do another video of that, even though we have a video on specific event, how to survive Tony Robbins events. This kind of explains as well that you're gonna have these things throughout the year where environment changes depending on what you do, not just outside environment, but what you do and how it affects you. So I will have a couple of days just fixing my body now based on this as well. And another thing is, after you have your blood test done, make sure you don't just cry about how bad it is or be like slightly excited how good it is if you don't have somebody who can explain you how to match it to your environment. Because we both know sometimes things can be in range when they shouldn't really be, and so on and so forth. It can be hidden issue, actually, if you're taking some medicine on top of that. And then all throughout that is what you keep bringing back. Don't underestimate how powerful it is to be more connected with nature. And it might change. We both know epigenetics is a thing. Why this is still so relevant? It's because we are exposed to this kind of living only for the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
Body still thinks we are pretty much like cavemen.
Yeah. Well, just to put it in perspective, right? We've only had artificial light for 100 years, right? That's only 2 generations, right?
And the light we have now, only a couple of decades.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So the change, like people are not putting this together. The change is dramatic compared to how our biological system is set up.
Yeah. And this might change in a couple of years, in a couple of decades or whatnot. Then it's going to be more relevant. But based on what we see, these are the things that work.
Yeah. And it will change, and it can change for you as the individual because you can vote with your money, the products you purchase, the lights you have in your house, the where you live. That is your vote for the change you want in your environment, right? We used to do it by just moving, right? If the environment wasn't good, the food ran out, the weather changed, we didn't like it, whatever. Guess what humans would do? They just left, right? So that environment is influenced by your decisions of what you decide to engage in. So when you say it can change in 3 or 4 years, it can change sooner than that if you're ready to take the change yourself on.
Yeah. That's some extreme cases, which I know you have been part of when consulting some people. David, as usual, appreciate your time, and I'll let you off. Be mindful of your time, and see you in next video.
Awesome. Thank you very much.